North Korea has reportedly fired over 10 missiles off its coast, and South Korea has called it a quote-unquote territorial invasion. Air raid sirens blared in parts of South Korea. 3 other ballistic missiles were also fired into the South's waters. Seoul says it was the first time that this kind of missile reached south of the disputed border. One of the missiles landed less than 60 kilometers off South Korea's coast. In a statement from Seoul, I'm quoting here, the North Korean missile launch is very unusual and unacceptable as it fell close to South Korean territorial waters for the first time. In response, South Korean military has fired 3 air-to-ground missiles. More details are awaited. This comes just hours after Pyongyang demanded joint drills by the United States and the South to stop. It did not stop with demands. Kim Jong-un sees the drills as threat and has vowed consequences. He also issued a veiled threat that both countries will have to pay the most horrible price in history. North Korea has repeatedly called the missile launches countermeasures. Japan has been a vocal critic of the latest developments as well. Washington and Seoul began one of their largest combined military air drills this Monday. Hundreds of warplanes from both sides staged mock attacks for 24 hours a day, but this has flared up tensions in the peninsula. North Korea test-fired a record number of missiles this year, and living up to its name, Pyongyang has branded all of them as retaliation, giving no further clarification on the same. And now for more on this, we're being joined by Dr. Graham Webb. He's an adjunct fellow at Rajaratnam School of International Studies and executive director of Higher Intelligence. Thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast.
Thank you for having me.
How do you assess the recent missile launches by the North?
In my assessment, the recent launches is actually relatively unsurprising, despite the fact that the barrage of missiles, the quantity of missiles and the manner in which they have landed south of the demarcation line is rather disturbing and highly provocative. But looking back at how the North Koreans have conducted themselves over the last few years, the last half decade alone, that this sort of saber rattling is quite typical of the North Korean regime under Kim Jong-un, particularly around the time when joint drills are being held between the United States military and its regional allies, particularly South Korea for a start, the South Korean military, and also the Japanese military and the Japanese naval forces as well. So this is a rather pattern that is quite predictable in terms of how the North Koreans react to such military exercises.
Right, absolutely. In fact, I was just going to ask that Seoul says that this was the first time this kind of missile reached south of the disputed border. Do you see this as a sign of what's to come in further escalation?
It may very well be. As you know, there may be an element of fear-mongering going around on all sides for various reasons. I mean, fundamentally, it's about various stakeholders, if you will, on both sides of the fence, maintaining attention on the issue. Because the Korean Peninsula crisis hasn't gone away. It's a perennial issue. It's been around for a long time. It's quite historical. The differences today is that the moving target, if you will, is military development on all sides, and in particular on the North Korean side, where the development towards a fledgling operational nuclear capability stands to be a game changer in the regional dynamics and the regional security situation in Northeast Asia. So I would say that we have to be very vigilant, because there will be very likely a series of developments heading towards further escalation. And this is where the global community, global and regional stakeholders have to really chip in terms of the dialogue and the thinking that is required to try to find a way out of the situation, out of this potential quagmire that we're heading into. Because if it escalates further, we are going to probably go into a very dark place when it comes to the Korean Peninsula.
Right, absolutely. You mentioned fear-mongering. There have been very real concerns that the North may test nuclear weapons as it did back in 2017. How real do you think that threat is?
Well, in my own humble assessment and opinion, I have written about this in the near past. in the pre-pandemic period, just on the cusp of the pandemic of early 2020, the COVID-19 coronavirus. And I had postulated that a seventh nuclear test is highly probable. It's a non-trivial likelihood. And the topic and the prospect of a seventh nuclear test has surfaced again. I've written on this topic on the basis of science and technology developments alone, and the research and development initiatives or prerogatives of the North Korean regime dictate that a seventh nuclear test needs to be conducted on their side in order to validate and have full confidence that their intercontinental ballistic missiles actually work and can actually travel to where they are intended to travel and generate the destructive power they are intended to generate. So, there is a science behind it that suggests to us that they are compelled to conduct a seventh nuclear test. But of course, at the end of the day, the final decision to conduct such a test has to be a political one, even despite what the science suggests. So that's really the onus on Kim Jong-un and his regime as to, are they willing to pay the political price of such a test? And that's something that we need to consider.
All right. Dr. Graham Mangweb, thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast with your insights on this.
Thank you.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.